Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm back. We are back with another broadcast for you. We got the Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 7 review. Now, as you can see, I'm on my own tonight. Unfortunately, Daryl was having a few technical problems, and if he gets them resolved, hey, we'll bring him on the show, we'll discuss it. But in the meantime, I'm going to do a review of Season 2, Episode 7, and if you guys are watching this, feel free to chat in. We're going to talk about it a little bit because this is a pivotal episode, in my opinion, and it all happens right now.
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. As I said, I am here. I keep wanting to say that we are here, but I am here with your Season 7 review, and like I said, unfortunately, Daryl had a little bit of a technical issue, so he couldn't join me tonight. But you know what? That's not going to stop me from bringing this to you guys tonight. So if you want to chat in, that's cool. You know, we could talk about this thing a little bit, but let's get started. This Mandalorian episode, The Believer, was, in my mind, a pivotal episode. Now, it seems like not a whole lot went on. I've heard some people complain about the fact that it wasn't quite as good as the last two episodes, at least in their opinion. You know, it dialed it down a bit, but I thought that the return of Bill Burr's character, Miggs Mayfield, was really, really good. I thought that was great. Hey, Ronaldo, what's going on, buddy? You're going to have to help me carry the show tonight. Unfortunately, Daryl, like I said, couldn't make it. Last-minute technical issues, but hey, that's not going to stop us, right? So, yeah, I mean, I thought that the whole return of Miggs Mayfield was a welcome return. And this is something that I don't know about you guys, but I honestly didn't think that he was going to come back. I thought that he was going to be a one and done. I was hoping he would come back, but really, honestly, I was skeptical. And as we were going this whole season without seeing his character at all, I just started thinking, you know what? I don't think he's going to be back on the show. So imagine my surprise, when they go and they go to this, basically this prison planet, and, you know, it's basically like they get him out. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that it was really neat that, they ended up doing this. Another takeaway that I had from this that really kind of surprised me, and I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but we'll get back and, we'll actually go through the episode a little bit more chronologically. But what surprised me was that for the first time, we saw Boba Fett with clean armor, which I thought was really kind of wild. I thought that was bizarre because I never really realized how scratched up Boba Fett's armor was in the original trilogy. I know it sounds kind of weird, but honestly, I didn't expect it. And so consequently, when I saw it, all cleaned up and everything, I was just like, man, that's really clean, and it was really strange. And there's a lot of theories as to why this was the case. And I'd be interested in hearing you guys, whether or not, you're chatting live. Because like I said, it's going to be a really quick little recap, little review, but certainly you have time to chat in, and you can also leave your comments below. We could be talking about this long after, but what are you guys thinking about that? What do you think about the whole Boba Fett's clean armor thing? I don't know. I thought that was that was really strange. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was the fact that they actually made a reference to Office Space. I don't know if you guys caught that or not, but they actually totally made a reference to Office Space with the whole TPS reports. Did you guys catch that at all? I thought that was really strange. But yeah, there are so many different things that, that they were actually covering with this whole thing. But, again, so it basically comes in where, Mando goes, he gets Cara Dune. Cara Dune's like, okay, I'm going to break Miggs Mayfield out of prison. They kind of put together this whole, like, Dirty Dozen thing. which I thought was really, really cool. Because remember, this is the first episode where we don't see Grogu at all. We don't see Grogu. We don't see any of that stuff. So, no Baby Yoda for this episode, right? But I thought it was really cool that they did that, because I think that the show was starting to get a little bit too much of a reliance on Grogu. I'm not saying that, the story went into a direction where it shouldn't have gone, or, they were shoehorning Grogu in, but there was definitely a reliance. Like, you could tell that they were really playing it up and that they were really doing it. And it's kind of a fine line, because, like I said, I'm not saying that story-wise any of the scenes with Grogu didn't fit, but it just seemed like you were beginning to wonder if the show could survive without Grogu, because he seemed to be the focus. And one of the concerns that I've been having, at least, I don't know about you guys, but I've been thinking about the whole idea that the show seems to be moving away from the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, and a little bit more into kind of being a springboard for other characters. And I think that this is a cool thing. I've pointed this out several times, that, it's a really, really cool thing. But at the same time, I think it's dangerous, to do it, because, again, you have to be really, really careful about how you approach making a show where it definitely has like a spin-off thing going, but at the same time, also maintaining the integrity of the show. Because you have to maintain the integrity of the show in order for the thing to be able to survive for other seasons. But again, I don't necessarily think that they've made any kind of a misstep. I just think that it is in danger of, one, having too much of a reliance on Grogu, two, being too much of a, okay, we're going to use this show to launch all these spinoffs. So anyway, I thought that this was a really cool way of doing it. Bear with me, guys. I'm trying to see if I can get Daryl back into this thing. He's been texting me. But, yeah. So again, if you guys have anything that you want to chime in there. Okay, Ronaldo's got some stuff. Says, I really liked the episode. It was a lot of fun. In a way, we could see a more human side of the Empire, which I thought was a nice touch. That was one of the things that I thought was really cool about this episode, is the fact that they're starting to do things more like what the novels are doing. They're beginning to explore the humanity of both the rebels and the Empire. Because again, in the novels, one of the things that I thought was really cool is the fact that you start to see that the rebels aren't exactly the knights in shining armor that, they were portrayed in the original trilogy. In the original trilogy, you definitely had this, white hat, black hat, good versus evil, this kind of vibe going. Whereas in this new canon, you could see the good guys sometimes, they're achieving a noble purpose, but they're not always doing it in a very noble way. And then on the other flip side of that, you also see that you have basically people that, yes, they're part of the Empire, and yes, we all know that Palpatine was in charge of it and all this other stuff, but they're not. They think that they're part of the legitimate government. And this is something that we talked about on the last show, which is a lot of people that are following the Empire are following it because it was the Republic. Everybody forgets that the Empire used to be the Republic. And to a lot of people, they thought that it was just, they were just doing their thing, right? They didn't know the Emperor was a Sith Lord. They didn't know all this stuff. So this is a very good point, that one of the things that this episode in particular did was to humanize the Empire a little bit. Some other highlights, I think we're finally seeing that Din Djarin, the Mandalorian, you really see that he truly cares about Grogu in this. You get a few senses of this, but, and again, you know, I know I didn't say this, but I know it's in the description of the show. This is a spoiler review. So you guys have been warned, because I'm about to do a big spoiler here. We see that Din Djarin actually takes his helmet off, which I thought was just, you know, that was actually, I don't know about you guys, but that really was unexpected to me. I didn't expect him to take his helmet off again in this season. Now, he did it once in the last season, but he did it to IG-11, and so it almost didn't count, right? Because it was a droid. So he wasn't really taking it off in front of, you know, other people. But hey, he's probably getting a little bit more of a perspective of what it means to be a Mandalorian now. I mean, you know, he's got all these other people of his kind that's kind of like, oh, you're one of those guys, one of those people that don't take off their helmets, like, you know, that group. So now he's starting to go, wait a second, you know, now all of a sudden I'm weird, right? He thought that he was following the Mandalorian code, and this is a way that he's doing it, but now he's finding out that, you know what, these people aren't doing that. You know, they're not having that anymore. So I thought that that was a really cool thing that they ended up doing. Ronaldo also says, Boba Fett looks 1,000 times better in his clean armor. Yeah, I don't know, man. I agree, but there's just something characteristic about that dinged up armor or something, you know? I mean, it's just weird. I'm not saying it's bad. It was just very strange. Because first of all, Tamir Morrison, and again, I'm not sitting here trying to like body shame anybody. I mean, I'd be the last person to do that. But, you know, and he looks bigger, and he looks a lot more hulking in the armor now. And I'm glad to see that he has a little bit more pieces of it, and it looks more like Boba Fett. Because that's another highlight of this show. Boba Fett is just killing it in this so far. I mean, I'm really excited to see it. And actually, there's a rumor going around that they may actually transition from Din Djarin to Boba Fett, and Boba Fett will be the Mandalorian. I know people have been saying, oh, Din Djarin's going to be killed off in the last episode. Hey, we got Daryl with us. Let's see. Hey, Daryl. We don't have audio from you, man. But hey, sit there for me and just see if you can get your audio working. And I'll keep talking. But yeah, man, I mean, I just think that, you know, it was... Wait, I hear you. Say something.
Check one.
Yes, we got him. I am so glad, dude, because honestly, I was not really prepared to do this show on my own. I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me with this.
No, man, it's like my computer's been doing something with some weird stuff lately today. I don't know what's been going on. I think ever since the crazy hacks that's been happening. I don't know, but I'm here.
Yeah. Well, that's good. You know, I just been talking about some of the highlights for the last 13 or so minutes or whatever. It's been kind of a very strange thing. And, you know, Ronaldo's come in. I talked about the return of Bill Burr. I talked about, you know, just, you know, Mandalorian might not be the focus of the show. Boba Fett's clean helmet. So, you know, let's just jump in there. Now that we've kind of gotten some of the introduction out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over the, let's just start to now go over the actual episode. I was trying to kill enough time until you were able to get into the show.
All right, cool. Yeah, let's get into it, man. Yeah, man, I like this episode. I thought it was cool. A lot of action. Honestly, though, I felt like it's not what I wanted to be the second to last episode.
Oh, I totally agree with that. In fact, one of the things, and I was saying this, that a lot of people are saying that it's not really as good or whatever as the last couple of episodes. And I can understand that. It's like, if you look at it as a standalone thing, I think it's really good. But as a second to last episode
right
from the finale, it's like,
yeah,
just didn't have quite enough.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, you know, of course, you know, we love seeing Boba Fett, you know, kick butt once again. But and Cara Dune, man, I like seeing her more and more, as the season goes on, both physically and acting wise.
Oh, I
But
understand. Trust me, I totally understand.
however, but no, like I think that one of the big things I felt like we're missing from this particular season, and maybe I'm sure there's a reason for it, is the lack of Gideon. Like I really wanted to see more of him or more into his story and really get into that character a little bit more. And then although like I did enjoy the fact that we got a chance to meet, finally meet Grogu and everything like that. And so that's what I'm saying. Like when you and I said this, on the onset of season 2, that there's so much stuff that they're bringing. There's so many people and characters that they're bringing in. We didn't even know about Cobb Vanth, but we knew about Bo-Katan. We knew about Ahsoka. We knew about Boba Fett. And that alone, it's kind of like, okay, those are some heavy hitters. And so then on top of that, like, I think we could have done away without the spider episode with the frog lady.
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
More
like,
and more that's turning out to be not as important as, we
exactly.
thought maybe by now we'd look back on that episode and go, oh yeah, okay, now I understand why this was. But so far we're like, yeah, there was really kind of a waste.
Yeah, and I think like with the introduction of Cobb Vanth, I mean, I like the fact that was relevant because it brought in Boba Fett. Like you see how that brought Boba Fett to the party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cool with that. But then, like I said, when we dealing with the frog lady, like, okay, it should have just been frog lady needs to go to this planet to reunite with her husband. Maybe, Grogu still chomps down a few eggs. And, but they still land. She meets up with them and then he runs into Bo-Katan. You see what I'm saying? Like, so then I think episode like the episode that we saw last night could have been shifted back episode or 2 and then or put in a different spot. And then now at the second to last episode, like, okay, we should see more about Gideon, in my opinion.
Well, there was a couple of key things. I mean, I brought up, it's kind of all over the map there in the beginning, but basically there was 2 things that I thought were really key though. So when he takes off his helmet, in order to, access the terminal or whatever.
Right.
He was doing that because it was sort of like, basically Miggs is all like, nah, man, they'll recognize me if I do it, I mean, and it's just like, and they'll definitely recognize Boba Fett. It's
right.
kind of like, oh yeah, you're basically the template for all the clones. So yeah, we know who you are. But what this showed more than any other episode was now he thinks of Grogu as his actual kid. This is no longer somebody that he's just trying to save or, he's like a custodian or he's babysitting. I mean, he basically violated, because he knew it was the only way to save him. He violated his code because of the way he feels now about him. And I thought that was really, just ultra poignant. By the way, did you catch in that scene? It was basically an Office Space reference. I brought this up earlier, too. They were talking about how they had to, file some TPS reports.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I laughed at that. Yeah, I did.
I was
crack
like,
up at
no
that.
way did they bring Office Space in. I mean, who knows? Maybe, we'll look back on TPS, or maybe that's an actual thing in Star Wars.
Right.
I don't know. But,
or, what's the funny thing? It would have been hilarious if they actually got, what's his name? Dang, I can't think of it.
Gary Cole.
Gary Cole, yeah, to actually, Lumberg to actually play that officer.
You could just,
yeah, that would have been priceless. But no, I mean, no, I think that like you said, we're seeing the maturation and the growth and development of the Mandalorian. So from he's grown by leaps and bounds since season 1, and the fact that he's learned so much more about his culture through other people, whether it's the armor or the you have of course Boba Fett, who's been teaching, and of course Bo-Katan and her entourage have kind of gave him insight that like, okay, this whole code and thing that you live by is not really like it's not that serious, and I think that's what everybody is kind of like trying to let the Mandalorian know, like, you're holding on. It's almost kind of like the whole Jedi thing too. It's kind of like you're holding on to these ideals that aren't really relevant.
Well, it's funny because I was making fun of this earlier before you got on, because it was kind of like, he's going around now and he's talking about his thing, and they're all like, "Oh, you're one of those guys. Like,
Yeah,
you're
you're one of
from
those
that
people.
group." Okay. So now
Yep.
he's kind of like, "Oh, I'm
I'm the
like
odd
that
man out.
weird." Yeah, exactly. Like you're some part of some weird cult or something.
Yeah, like the social lepers.
Exactly. It's like you grow up thinking that this is the way, like this is what you're supposed
This is
to
the
be
way.
doing. Yeah. And he's all thinking he's following the Mandalorian code, and every Mandalorian he meets is just like taking off their helmet all casually and doing all
Yep.
this. And then what's even funnier is, and it's kind of like if Bo-Katan had just stuck with him, she would have found Gideon a lot faster.
Yeah.
That's what I really find kind of hilarious about.
Well, the fact that Gideon is actually after him and the kid, so it's like,
Yeah, it just
stick
stands
with
to
me.
reason.
I'm actually gonna seek me out anyway.
Yeah, let me see what this looks like. Okay, this isn't bad. So, Ronaldo says another nice touch was that they showed the seismic charges from Slave One. I can't get enough of hearing them explode.
Yeah, I really love that, and I'm right with you, Ronaldo. Like I always love, the seismic charges, from Attack of the Clones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then he goes on to say, that name, Rick Famuyiwa, gives off great Indiana Jones vibes both in this episode and in episode 2 of the first season. If they ever do a Dr. Aphra series, he would be a perfect director. And I agree with that, actually, because it is kind of a sense of adventure. I mean, a lot of times people are kind of bagging on this episode, but I think that, again, I totally agree with you that a second to last episode, at only 35 minutes, by the way, not exactly the best decision. But if you take it as a standalone episode, I thought it was really good. And I thought it actually had this like kind of adventure type of vibe. And, I was really glad to see Bill Burr back because, and I mentioned this before you got on too, that I honestly didn't think he was going to show up again, much less during this season. So I just think that it's one of those things. Go ahead.
Oh, my fault. No, all I was going to say, one of the things I really enjoyed is the growth and development of all the characters in this particular episode. So you see the growth of Cara Dune because she's just newly appointed marshal, but already she's kind of breaking the law for the greater good. It's what she believes is the greater good for the Mandalorian. You see Bill Burr's character. He's once again he's been broken out of prison, but this whole attitude he's kind of had kind of changed, a lot of different things. And then of course you see in the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, he's also changed, as far as his personality is concerned or his emotions or ideals toward certain things. So you really get to see the growth of a lot of these different characters as opposed to when we see them in we last saw them like in other episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this episode too, is that there's just so much growth that happens among all these characters. It's not just a bunch of fun adventures. On the other hand, this is something I brought up earlier too. I want to get your thoughts on this. There's rumors that not only is this thing kind of like a launching off for other series, which I think that if they go too far with that, it could actually ruin the whole structure of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But there's rumors that they might actually kill off Din at the end of the season, and Boba Fett will now be the Mandalorian. Which, I mean, you can kind of see that, but I really hope that doesn't happen because I'm invested in that character. I mean, what's funny is when this whole thing started and they said, oh, yeah, we're coming out with the show The Mandalorian, I was hoping it was Boba Fett.
Right.
I mean, I think everybody was. But then, you get to know this guy, and he's actually a really cool character. Ronaldo says, do you think the last episode will be an hour long?
It almost has to be.
I was going to say, I think it has to be an hour long. I don't think that you can actually get by without making it an hour long because there's just too much. I mean, first of all, let me clarify this. I think that there's going to be a lot of things that they are going to push to season 3. I think we can pretty much all bet on that.
Yeah.
that they're not going to wrap up every little thing because, Daryl, I'm kind of in the same way as you are. I do think they should have shown a little bit more Gideon.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we're definitely going to need that come season 3. To your
Absolutely.
to your earlier point though about them killing off of Den, I could see it. I could understand why. Of course, you can say like, well, he could just continue his adventures off in the galaxy. He's not a part of the sequel. We don't necessarily need to know where he is by Force Awakens or anything like that. So certainly, as long as, and I could see him, sacrificing himself in such a way.
The whole Han Solo vibe.
Yeah, and the whole, he's doing this thing for this kid, and it kind of, you almost kind of wonder like what it does to Grogu if that does happen. And then I just think that, if they pick it up, like, of course, see, not only are we just as invested in the Mandalorian, but we're also invested in Grogu.
Yeah.
So now we got to figure out, okay, well, what do you do with this character that everyone fell in love with? What do you do with that now?
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I brought up. Actually, I've talked about a lot of stuff earlier. Basically, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is the fact that Grogu wasn't in this episode at all.
All right.
And yet, it completely stood on its own, and it was still compelling and interesting. Because one of the things I was saying was that even though they didn't really shoehorn him into any storylines, there is a reliance on that character now because he's such a breakout character and he's so popular, that I think that there's a temptation to, let's get another, Grogu scene in there.
All right.
And I think that that's something that would be dangerous. And it was nice to see him not being in an episode at all. And yet the show was still able to completely stand on its own and be compelling. And in fact, I kind of forgot he wasn't there. I was so involved in the other characters and stuff,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think that when you have characters, much like a Vader, like he's such a beloved character that you want to see him in everything, but you can't overuse him. Yeah. And that's the thing with characters. It's almost no different than how we, how we say about music or even our food. It's all has to be in the mix, right? So you may love the bass guitar, or you may love drums, but you don't want to have it overshadowing the whole arc of the thing. You want it to sit perfectly, and it comes in where it needs to come in. There's no different than the food. You don't want things too sweet or too salty. You want to have that nice blend. And so with Grogu, I think you have to kind of do that with that character. He's not, remember, the show is The Mandalorian, so we're really supposed to be focused on him.
Right.
It's just the fact that Grogu is kind of like this cute sidekick that you can't get enough of him. But it's one of those things where, like, where's this character of The Mandalorian truly going? Where is this character going to end up? And that's what we always have to bring up. So I think the directors have, wisely put Grogu where he needs to be. But at the same time, we also have to get back to like, okay, who is this guy and why do we need to care about him the way that we do?
Yeah, in fact, there was a story we were going to cover last week until, Lucas just dropped all these new projects on us. But we were talking about there was supposed to be a Mandalorian prequel.
Right.
Which I could see the need for that because it's true. It's like, what is this guy's backstory? And I think that there could be a lot of really rich stories that you can tell. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to me to the whole Cassian Andor thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of the things that makes Andor so cool, and who knows what they're going to cover in the actual series, but the fact that he used to be a separatist, and he ends up joining the rebellion, which basically also more or less broke away from the Republic because the Republic more or less became the Empire. So you have this character who always seems to be on the other side of things, of the legitimate government, but he has a very noble streak to him. He'll get the job done, but, he'll pretty much use whatever means is necessary. And I think Din Djarin is kind of the same way. I think that here's a guy that obviously was around during the Clone Wars and everything, and he was basically like, victimized by that. He was saved by the Mandalorians. He became a foundling. And I just think that there's a lot of story that you could tell on what led this guy to be the way that he is.
Well, sure. I mean, you could talk about, because see, the thing is, you can actually go into more in depth into that version of the Mandalorian, if you will. So, we know like the Mandalorian culture as on Mandalore, but this whole camp of kind of the remix, if you will, we don't really know that much about their whole structure and what goes into that, and why don't they take off their helmets and this whole creed and everything that they have. So you could just do a backstory just simply on that alone, and then you kind of could chronicle his journey to being like the kick butt Mandalorian that we kind of were introduced to as. But he wasn't always like that. So like, how did he even get to that point? How did he get hooked up into the guild and with grief and saying that whole.
Sure. I mean, there's like a whole, because eventually I think it was Bo-Katan was saying that he was basically like part of the Children of the Watch, which I remember that was introduced back in the Clone Wars animated series. So you could really do a lot of tie-ins with that, and
sure,
give us a lot of that information. All right, so what are your, like, let's just say top 3 favorite moments from The Believer?
Top 3 favorite moments. I did like the whole I guess the comedy between Bill Burr's character and Mandalorian. Like the fact that he kept trying to like push his buttons and the Mandalorian just kept ignoring him.
That's one of mine. I mean, they're probably going to be roughly the same. I mean, one of my favorite lines in the whole thing was when he sees Boba Fett and he's like, "Oh man, I thought you were the other guy."
The other guy. Then he walks out. Yeah. Then he's like, "Oh."
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's so many lines. It's funny because I saw it, Friday morning at probably like 3 a.m. Like I was so tired, and I wanted to try to review it a little bit more before we did this episode, but I just got so caught up. So there's some things that actually did slip, but yeah. The comedy in this thing was just incredible.
Yeah, it's total the comedy, but then also I like the little lesson that actually Bill Burr, I wasn't expecting him to give. When he was just like, well, about him breaking his rules, because he's like, well, it's not about breaking. It was like, what are you willing to give up for your? You know what I'm saying? And I thought that was kind of like,
I know, wasn't that weird? Wasn't that like out of left field? Like. Really?
Exactly. It's like he had time to think while he was in prison or something like that. Or just the fact that he's been around, and the fact that, he's been at Imperial, that he's had all these different things. His anger towards the Empire.
Yeah.
Like that was a big like thing, when he's like kind of going over this thing with that officer. He's just kind of like, yeah, man. Well, what about all those people that we lost? What about those friends, and what about those innocent villagers, and what about this, and what about this? Like, it's almost like you guys scarred me.
Yeah, well, that was actually my number 2. That whole scene was kind of my number 2 thing, is the fact that, and it actually lends a lot of depth to his character, because the Migs Mayfield character, when you see him, you could tell that there was something there. Like, he wasn't totally two-dimensional or anything like that, but it was like, it wasn't like super deep, I guess would probably be the best way to put it. You know what I mean? It's like He was just kind of there to advance the story. And he was funny and he was cool, but it wasn't like you were sitting there going, "Oh, I want a Migs Mayfield standalone story or something,"
Right.
Now I kind of do, though, because you could see you in that one scene, you basically see this guy's story.
Yeah.
And there's so much depth, and I thought that this is a good example of why I love this show so much, is because they'll take all these characters, and at first you almost think they're side characters.
And
then you start to realize, like, no, these guys, you could do a spin-off show of them. And, knowing Lucasfilm, you're going to get Mayfield,
Well, the thing here's the takeaway from the galaxy, though, and I think this is the big thing, is that in some way, shape, or form, everyone has a story, number one. But the other part, too, is that everybody has been affected in some way, whether it be the same or differently by the Empire. Whether you joined the Empire and then you decided
Yes.
to leave, whether you lost people like Cara Dune and you were fighting against the Empire, whether you are Grogu and you had to be hidden away from the Empire, whether you are Gideon and you are a part of the or you are remnants of the Empire and you want to hold on to that. You see what I'm saying? Like everybody's kind of connected by the Empire in some way.
Absolutely. And that's true. Because in fact, you can look at it through the whole series like that. But I think particularly this episode, it's emphasizing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, which goes into my third one, it's when, he starts to refer to Grogu. It's almost like it's your kid. It's your kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he's taken off the helmet because at first he's resistant, but then, Mayfield kind of gives him that speech and everything. And then he goes and he actually does it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was just the way they handled that to me. It was just so incredible.
I also love the fact that who was, I think it was a Mandalorian, basically one when he actually had on different armor. Like it was weird.
Oh yeah.
To see him in that whole trooper armor, but
well, actually, what's funny about that? What was funny about that to me was he started taking like a bunch of hits, and it was almost like he realized, like, oh yeah, this isn't my best scar. I can't, I can't keep doing this.
That and yeah, I mean that was a good point. But also, like, when they pulled into the station or whatever, and then they did whatever they had to do, and at the end of it all, Mayfield is like, I didn't see anything. Basically, like, I didn't see you take your helmet off or anything. Like,
oh yeah,
never happened. It kind of totally reminded me of that Halloween thing. Like, nope, didn't happen.
Yeah, the Texas Chainsaw thing.
That's what it was. Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, it's like, it's all right, didn't happen.
Yep.
That still gets me. But yeah, exactly. And that just, again, it shows you that there's these guys aren't just cardboard cutout characters, that there's actual depth in these guys. And that's something that I appreciate. And it's not just the main characters. It's not just like your Ahsokas and all this stuff. It's, look at the turn that Grief Karga made.
Yeah.
Look at the growth that he had. Cara Dune is another one. But I could see that there'd be more of a story with Kara's character, but Mayfield, I mean, who would have thought that this guy would be? He's kind of like a comic relief, but there's also some depth and drama there.
Yeah.
Something that I think that Bill Burr so far is handling brilliantly.
Yeah, he's done it masterfully. And that's one of the cool things when you can actually go from being like kind of the comedian to like now all of a sudden it's almost kind of like not comparing him completely to this person, but it's kind of like Jim Carrey. You see this guy who's normally just goofy and silly and he can crack all these jokes, but then like you see him in like the Truman Show or something like that, or what's the other one that he did? But he was like really like serious, and you're just like, wow. So that whole scene where we saw him like going back and forth with that officer, it was like really gripping. It was kind of like a scarred like Vietnam vet or something like that, and he's finally like getting the chance to say what he wanted to say. And then of course well, also another thing one little small minute thing that I did like was the fact like they're always like taking over some stormtrooper or whatever and then putting on their armor, and the fact that it's like, oh man, this guy still is wet, his gloves are still like reaching.
Yeah.
I just love that. I was like, yes,
funniest thing. Well, actually, and Ronaldo says, before any controversy, Mayfield shot first.
Yes, Ronaldo.
But that brings up a good point too, because what was weird was he didn't even just like, kind of reach under the table and shoot him. I mean, he just like spits out a gun, aims him like in the middle of this whole essentially cafeteria, or commissary, and just shoots him like right in the chest. Like no
Point
pretense.
Nope.
Just this is what I'm doing. And
Gotta go.
And Din's just looking at him like, really?
Like, yeah. He's like, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. And you could tell everybody else is kind of freaked out, like, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and then of course, Ronaldo also says, "Who would believe that the first living being to see Din Djarin's face would be Mayfield?"
That's true. Like I
That
thought it
is
would be
a
the
that's
Cara
a good
Dune, honestly.
exactly. It's like when you start to think of, because I don't even know if he took it off around Grogu.
Mm-mm.
So I mean,
He would kind of lift it up a little bit when he was like
yeah,
drinking.
yep. But I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like that's a good point. That's significant. Ronaldo goes on to say, "My top three: one, when Din Djarin took off his helmet; two, when Mayfield shot the Imperial; and three, the fight between Din and the pirates."
Yeah,
That was actually really cool too.
it
And
was.
and it really was nice to see that kind of
He was a butt kicker.
yes.
Yeah, he
And
kind of
that
had a
was
little Boba
nice
Fett
too.
in him.
Right. Right. Because sometimes I think that they underpower him a little bit too much. I mean, and I've said this in previous
Hmm.
episodes too, where it's like, I don't know, man. I think that he should have, I'm not saying don't make it a struggle, but let's not make it that much of a struggle. I mean, this guy is supposed to be this Mandalorian warrior that's been trained, and all this other stuff. It's like, let's not make it that easy. But at the same time, just don't make it to where it's like, oh, come on. I mean, this guy's almost like
Right.
not worthy to wear the armor or something, and I thought that this was, and this is another thing that, by the way, I think that they've been improving the whole season. And they've been pretty much powering him where they should.
Yeah, I think this episode, like you might have touched on this earlier, but I think this was kind of like a setup for Cara Dune because she kind of had a lot to do in this episode.
Yeah,
And
I
she's been
didn't set
featured.
that up.
She's been featured a lot more heavily. If you notice within the last few, with her being this whole Marshall thing, she's got the access to this, and I think that they say she's probably going to be in that Rangers of the New Republic.
There's been actually, she might appear in there only because it does happen at the same time as The Mandalorian. She's supposed to have her own series at some point if she could stay out of trouble. I mean, she's had some controversy following her, and this latest tweet that she did too is probably not going to fare. Yeah, she basically put a meme up that's Yoda, say like fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to butt hurt or feelings or something like that. It's actually pretty funny. So
I wonder who she's talking about.
basically all the people that have just been giving her a bunch of crap for a lot of the things that she's been tweeting.
Gotcha.
And have been calling for her to be fired and all this stuff. I mean,
Dang.
she herself is basically becoming, I mean, there was a petition going around. There's rumors that say that Lucasfilm is like, okay, they're not writing her out of The Mandalorian, but if she doesn't kind of chill out, then they're not going to give her own show. And, there's just like, there's been a lot going on where Gina's concerned. And so she's becoming as divisive as The Last Jedi. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, she's almost bad as John.
As bad as who?
John Boyega.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. But I mean, at least Boyega's just been like, I don't know, kind of outspoken against certain things. But I mean, she's just been, again, it comes down to her tweets, how she feels about certain things. And people, because this is cancel culture and this is kind of like if you don't follow a certain thing, then we're going to stomp on you, basically. She's not having it, man. She's fighting back. And it's like,
well, she's a fighter, man. I mean, that's what fighters fight. I mean, you just got to.
Well, yeah. And it's one of those things where, if you feel her views are somewhat extreme or whatever, it's like, okay, cool. But, she does have the right to express them. On the other hand, you do have to remember you're the star of this big franchise program. And, it's almost like at work, it's not so much that work is in your personal life, but, if you work for a certain kind of company and you're basically showing like all your social media pictures have you like drinking and partying and doing all this stuff. I mean, it just doesn't.
It doesn't present a good image.
Exactly. It doesn't reflect on the company too much, even though you're not on company time. This is one of the unfortunate, far-reaching parts of social media that are bad, is that, unfortunately, it creates this really fine line. And she's experiencing that now. And so we'll see what happens. But I definitely think, though, that the fact that they're featuring her character more is a good thing. And I think that her story has become a lot more interesting than I initially thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really want to hear, kind of, I say, I would love to see the background on her, though. Like, honestly, like her as a, a jump trooper. A shock trooper. I would love to see her, just like how she dealt with the thing with Alderaan and, that whole battle and everything like that. Like, that's interesting to me.
Once again, I mean, there's so much there. There's so much that you could do with her character because they flesh out her story. And I think that that's one of the things that's really the key to this whole series is that they're really doing with this series something the sequel trilogy failed to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what it seems to be the avenue that is now being taken within Lucasfilm is that we have to plan. And I think we're starting to see that now with, the High Republic, with all these releases and things like that. Like, I think they're really starting to, the light came on, like, okay, we have to really spec this stuff out because otherwise we're going to have, all these flops and we're going to, just ruin this franchise that, honestly has pretty much been impenetrable, since its onset.
Now, here's a question for you. Do you think that they're going to, in a weird way, because, everybody's always talking about, oh, they're going to remake the sequel trilogy. They're going to, do all this stuff. But what they could do, either on purpose or inadvertently, is they could end up retconning the sequel trilogy just by the advancement of all these series.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, I thought about it because remember I brought up the point about Ahsoka's, when they display Ahsoka's little logo, it had the whole world between worlds things.
Oh, you know what? And they could do that. I mean, it would be cheesy in a way, but they could do that. They could basically.
Yeah, that's the way to fix it.
It's like, that was kind of one possible future, but here's how it really happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Ezra pulled me from here. This is what was going on. This is also what's going on too, and so that is the possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
but I don't think they could do a sequel trilogy after that though, because you can't call it that because then people would just kind of that would confuse everybody.
Right. Ronaldo says, personally, I'm not bothered by Gina Carano's comments. The only thing that interests me about her is her work in The Mandalorian, not her opinions or personal life. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's where people, I mean, again, as an artist, it's almost like with music, it's the same thing. It touches people and people have a hard time separating the person from the work or, in this case, the characters they play. It's like if they affect you in a certain way, they have ownership in your heart, I guess is like the best way to put it. And so you tend to hold them in a higher regard and you hold them to more scrutiny, and that's the danger of it is that, you have to separate the actors from the characters they're playing. Same thing with, with music. It's kind of like, okay, people might disappoint you. I mean, one of the things that people always say is never meet your heroes because they're probably going to be jerks to you or something like that, and it's going to ruin that whole vibe. And
well, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, I just think that that's a dangerous thing to do. That's all.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing, and this is the problem, and I remember actually a long time ago, Eric, you taught me this, is that like you can have too much freedom. You can have too much of a good thing sometimes. And I think that's where we are in the world right now is that we have too much access. Everybody wants access to everything. And so then that when you do that, everybody has this sense of entitlement that they should say something or I feel like I have to get my point across or I have to do this. And it's like, no, you don't, sometimes, and that's the thing about when you start getting into celebrity lives, like, the most you heard it was from third person perspective, like, oh, I read it in a tabloid or something like that, which we all knew, like, okay, those are just, fake news a lot of times. But when you actually have the artist or the actor or somebody from their personal account do something, especially if they have a picture of it or whatever the case may be, now it's left up to people's interpretation sometimes too. Like a person, you may not understand that person's sense of humor. So it's like I met something as a joke, and people, my friends, my personal friends who I see or talk to on a regular, they would get it and they would laugh at it because it's no different than you and I. Like there's jokes that you and I can make. We said this all the time. If people heard some of the jokes that we made, people were looking at us like, oh, but we get it. But I can't put that on social media as head to head because then people will look at us as
right,
you know,
and that's it. And I think that you bring up a really good point with that is the fact that a lot of times, you know, because we have this kind of access to people, it's giving us, you know, different kinds of insights or whatever than what we would normally have. And the problem is quite frankly, people just aren't allowed to have their own opinions anymore. It's like every group is basically like you have to think and act like us. And nobody's, you know, and unfortunately in this era that we have to where, you know, you can surround yourself with the people who think like you. You can go on social media and basically curate it to your own personal worldview. You can watch the news outlet that subscribes to your bias. You can pretty much put together your own little world to where nobody thinks the opposite of you and nobody challenges anything. You know, and then of course when you run into somebody who's maybe a little bit more outspoken about something, it just freaks you out because you've surrounded yourself with, you know, people like you. And so I think that this is what's happening in our celebrities too. In fact, you know, celebrities sometimes are ostracized if they don't think like the majority of Hollywood or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, you have something like this. And it would be a shame if that really ruined this whole thing because her character is cool. It's compelling. She's doing a good job. She's not, you know, I mean, there's no reason not to give her series. I would like to see a Cara Dune series.
I surely would, especially if she's wearing white pants. But anyway,
hey, you never know. One can only hold out hope, right?
I know, right?
But I mean, what about you guys? Are you guys, you know, thinking? Well, first of all, before I turn it over to them, let's do this. Let's wrap up the show like this. What do you think now is going to happen in the season finale? And what do you think we're going to see? And then also, what do you think we're not going to see?
I'm going to say, I think they're going to, of course, you know, find Gideon. I think what's going to happen is then it's going to contact Bo-Katan somehow and to give her the coordinates like, okay, this is where you can find Gideon because they need all the help they can get.
Avengers assemble.
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. And then I think they're just gonna, you know, now how the only way I could see something like maybe with Ahsoka is maybe she feels Grogu in the Force or something like that, and it's like, okay, she senses he's in danger and she comes to the rescue as well. And then I think that's where we get this climactic lightsaber duel.
Yeah, I mean, so you do think there's going to be a lightsaber duel of some point, of some part, right? Okay. Which would be nice because, you know, he basically said, like, oh, yeah, there's going to be tons of duels and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, we've gotten a couple, but I do think that they're going to definitely bring back a lot of the characters. There's been a rumor that we're actually going to see Ezra Bridger in there.
Yeah.
Because the guy that did his voice is basically, he tweeted something from Lord of the Rings, which was basically like during the Two Towers when all hope was lost and then Gandalf comes in to save the day. He basically quoted from that. And people are reading into that it's sort of like Ezra's going to come in at like the final moments and, and, you know, be the hero basically. And it's possible because remember, Grogu did reach out with the Force for quite some time.
Right.
And Ezra would be the logical person to respond to it, at least for now.
True.
I mean, you could say, well, what about Luke or whatever, but just from a practical standpoint, I don't think that they're going to bring him in. And I think that they're trying to expand the universe as much as possible. So I think there's a possibility we could see Ezra.
I do too. But do you think because of that we'll see Thrawn?
That's the big question. I mean, we didn't know about the Darksaber, so, and we talked about this too when we did our Thrawn episode, that it's possible, everybody's speculating, oh, I think it should be this guy, I think it should be that guy. Yeah, chances are they've already shot the scene. It's kind of like...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they already got their guy.
Yeah, they got their guy. The guy already shot the scene. We're about to see it in the finale. There's a big possibility that we could see Thrawn. Big, big, big possibility. But I don't know if I would bet the whole thing on it. Ronaldo says, I think they will go to save Grogu, and in the middle of everything, they will find Bo-Katan as a prisoner. That'd be interesting. I also think there will be a fight between Gideon and Din Djarin with his Beskar staff. That could be.
Now, I wonder. Well, I guess it has to be, because I was thinking, like, well, I wonder if his Beskar staff can stand up against the lightsaber. But of course, because we saw Din Djarin block the lightsaber with his forearm.
Mm-hmm. Well, not to mention the staff, when it was in the hands of the magistrate, basically that's what she was using to fight Ahsoka.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yep.
That's where he got it from.
Yeah.
Ronaldo also says, do you think we will see the Jedi that was going to appear in Tython? Well, I think
that's Ezra.
Ezra. Yeah, I think that's Ezra. When Grogu actually called out to the Force, I think Ezra is going to be the one to answer the call. I'm going to say over 60% that we see Ezra. And I'm going to say like maybe over 40% that we'll see Thrawn.
I'm good with those numbers.
Because it just seems like that's where the story is going, so I could totally see that. But at the same time, it's so hard to predict, because I don't think they're going to wrap up this whole story in the season.
No, I think that might be, if they wrap it up, it may be 3. It may be at the end of 3.
Well, and that's basically it. I think that there's just too much that they have to deal with, and I think you're right. I think maybe at the end of 3, that's what we can see. But
Which we have found out. That's been confirmed.
Yes. Season 3 has been confirmed, and it's coming out around Christmas. Now, we don't know what that means, Christmas Day of 2021 or just kind of during the holiday season, which is really terrible, because now it's like we got to wait even longer.
But hopefully we'll have other content that will actually
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping like maybe we get a Boba Fett miniseries, or, any of these other like 30 shows that they announced, which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen, we go over every one of the shows, and we broke it up into individual videos on our channel. So, if you don't want to sit through the whole 3-hour thing, I understand. You can look at the series that interests you. We break it down a little bit. We talk about not only what was revealed at that Lucasfilm investors meeting, or the Disney investors meeting, but we also pretty much go into some of our predictions and speculation. So they're fun episodes to check out. So I'll link the full episode in the description of this. But yeah, I just think that there's a lot of room for speculation on this one, because we really don't know what we're going to be getting this week.
No, I can't wait till Friday.
I know.
For multiple reasons, but
yes,
definitely that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So, let us know what you guys are thinking about this episode, about the whole series so far. Let us know in the comment section what you're thinking about that. Definitely subscribe to us, hit the like button, and then, of course, the notification bell, so you guys can see when we're coming out with more content, because as you can see, we are delivering on our promise. We are actually coming to you guys with more content, and there's even more to come. So you're not going to want to miss out on that. You can also follow us at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I think that's going to do it for this episode. Again, make sure that you're with us this Friday at 8, where, of course, we're going to be talking more Star Wars. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at headtoheadsw. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.